Hi everyone, welcome to my show. Special guest, my father. He's in town, so I figured we'll make use of this. Um, so now, as a writer, and I assume viewers here are going to be writers and readers, um, we always want more readers. We wonder why people stop reading fiction. Why, especially science fiction, which is the genre I write in, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of fantasy fans. Science, I would say if science fiction is undergoing kind of a definition change these days, where The Hunger Games is considered science fiction by many. So there's realistic science or hard science fiction as they call it, and then there's soft or dystopian science fiction. Um, my father grew up reading science fiction and enjoying it, and he kind of stopped at some point. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Um, so now, first of all, your favorites, like you had favorite authors like Asimov, Bradbury.
In the science fiction realm, yes, Asimov certainly was one of the very favorites. I really loved the Foundation series. That probably is what got me interested seriously in science fiction. And actually, I started it out of order with the middle volume. I had picked it up and read it, and then I went back and read the prior volume, and then the third volume in the series. And in that era, in the 1950s, when I was reading this, or the 60s, it was all that had been written. I mean, he subsequently added all kinds of additional novels in the series, but they didn't exist back then.
Hmm. So, I mean, what were you reading? Heinlein? I guess he came a little bit later.
Yes, I was reading Heinlein. Let's see. I mean, the big hits back then were things like I'm getting. I don't even know if I remember. I put the name of the author with the novel, but the big stuff I read back then, there was Stranger in a Strange Land. I think that was Heinlein, and Dune. The Dune series came a little later.
That
I
was
read
Frank
that.
Herbert.
Yeah, Frank Herbert. That was pretty good. At least I enjoyed it. And probably the very first one I ever remember reading was Ray Bradbury's. It was about Mars. It was about. I can't think of the name of that book, but it was early on.
I'm going to embarrass myself, and I don't remember it either.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the very first sci-fi story I read. It was Ray Bradbury. Eventually, they made a TV series of it about 10 or 15 years ago, about the Martian Chronicles.
Oh, yeah. Name. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. That was
something I should know.
Right, and I enjoyed that. That was the very first one I read. And there also were lots of pulp sci-fi magazines that I enjoyed. I'd read from time to time. There were quite a number of them back then. There was science fiction. There was analog. There was a lot of them. You can go to any newsstand, and there would be half a dozen of those things at least.
Yeah. The Edgar Rice Burroughs ones.
That's more. I did enjoy Edgar Rice Burroughs. He was another favorite of mine, but that's more. That was pure fantasy, really, and I didn't see that as science fiction. I read whatever I could get on the John Carter and Mars series, then there was another one, a Carson and Venus series, and then there was something about Pellucidar, the interior of the Earth had some kind of civilization in it. I don't remember all of it, but it was just escapist fantasy. I enjoyed it, and later on in college, I read the Lord of the Rings series, which I enjoyed, and The Hobbit, and then I just pretty much I stopped reading it. I stopped reading science fiction. I tried once again on a vacation. I read a few of the Asimov, the later stories about robots and the Foundation series. I enjoyed them, but I had just different priorities. By the time I was in my 20s, I was interested in, it was career, and I never did particularly enjoy reading fiction other than science fiction or fantasy. And what I did enjoy reading was mostly history, factual, nonfiction, history, science, lots of science, all different fields, and I became more and more focused on career and family.
Yeah.
And just didn't have time for it. So it kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, but yet you do watch movies and TV shows, so I
Yeah.
mean, you're still getting some escapism or some,
Occasionally, yeah. I mean, it's limited, but yes. And of course, back in the 1950s, I still enjoy the classic 1950s sci-fi movies and a lot of the really not so classic ones.
yeah.
They're just enjoy it. Just pure escapism. You know, the crawling eye, the attack of the crab monsters. The better ones were things like Forbidden Planet and the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and there were a lot. It Came from Outer Space. That was one of the real early ones, like in 1952 or something.
What came from out of space? An alien?
A group of aliens that people were afraid of, and they basically were really not interested in hurting people except in self-defense, and they were repairing their damaged spacecraft. I think that might have been a Frank Herbert story, actually, that was made into a movie.
Oh.
But it actually was pretty scary for a little kid. I mean, I was grade school age at that point, and it was. I used to go to the movies, and in those days you can go see a triple feature for 10 cents.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it seems to me like I know that you like nowadays Grimm and Breaking Bad and shows like that. So a little bit more on the dark side, monsters and, or the monster inside people, so to speak.
The thing that stopped me from reading, that I think when I stopped reading science fiction, was I started reading these Hugo Award winners, and the award winners I would take a shot at, and some of them, I mean, I still remember the name of one that I really didn't like. It was called Stand at Zanzibar or something like that, and I mean, I tried to push into it, but it just didn't make it for me, and that was the last try, really. Just too busy with other things, and it didn't grab me. That kind of soured me on it. I think also there was the nature of the science fiction stories changed. That was an example of it. They started to become less fantastic, less the kind of thing that would capture your imagination, and more trying to make it like a literature kind. Written literature, which never interested me in the first place. I mean, it's not that I didn't read it. I had to read it for school, but I didn't like it.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are many people that might agree with that. So yeah, okay. And so you think that the science fiction was becoming more literary, kind of?
Yes, the only. And in those days, they really didn't consider it a form of literature. I mean, I still remember when I was in college, I wanted to one of the English courses I was taking required a book report on an author, a well-known author. Well, I wanted to do this on H.G. Wells. I enjoyed H.G. Wells science fiction. And they wouldn't, I mean, I had to really work to convince the teacher that this was a legitimate genre of literature.
That's too bad, especially since H.G. Wells was by that point very old or dead already.
He was gone,
yeah,
of course. He died 20 years earlier.
Oh.
But this was, in the early 1960s, that was not considered legitimate English literature or American literature. It was not considered. Science fiction was not considered a genre of literature that was worthy of academic study.
I see. Yeah. Well, that's changed a little bit. I mean, well, maybe quite a lot.
I think,
but,
yeah. What is considered legitimate academic study now is much loosened.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I mean, yeah. So you would you say that? I mean, it sounds to me like it was partially you were losing interest anyway. Like, if you do you think that if you tried looking, you would have found more fantastic, fun, adventurous type of science fiction fantasy again, but you just had lost enough interest to be looking through the bookstores searching for it?
I would imagine if I tried enough of it or really made an effort to look for it, I could have found something I would enjoy reading. But I was just simply, your life goes on. I was just simply too focused on career and family at that point. I wasn't looking for
Yeah.
entertainment except very sporadically, and that was made up in the movies. Once in a while we go see. I remember Star Wars was a real big hit, but that was already that was the year you were born, I think, 78.
I think it came out in '76, and I was born
Oh.
in 2 years
Well,
after that. But
Anyways, we really like that because that followed Star Wars followed a period when movies were very they had kind of unhappy endings. There was a period of years there in the mid '70s when the country was undergoing turmoil. You had the Watergate stuff, the Vietnam War. There was a lot of turmoil, and there was a lot of there was a whole stream of movies coming out of Hollywood that were just depressing. I mean, I never could understand. We basically almost stopped going to the movies in the mid '70s because who wants to go to a movie and walk out depressed? I mean,
yeah, so I do understand. Of course, Star Wars made a huge splash
Yes.
with many people that way.
The first movie that came out after that era that was very upbeat was Rocky, and just shortly after that was Star Wars, and that was just spectacular. It was just so well done with the special effects compared to earlier efforts, and the story was so captivating and positive in a lot of ways that
Yeah,
it was just a very welcome change.
I bet. And so, and I'm sure after that, like, a lot of people enjoyed Back to the Future and movies like that. There were some fun science fiction
Yeah.
type movies afterward. But, nowadays, like, have you seen movies recently that make you want to go back and start reading science fiction again? Like, you saw The Hunger Games. I don't know what else. I'm trying to think of some.
No, well, we saw.
Oh, well, yeah, there's Transcendence and Lucy and a few
Yeah,
movies
we've
like
seen
that.
a few of those. No, I must say most of them are not. One thing that I find very difficult with enjoying movies today is, especially science fiction movies, they're so top heavy with special effects. They seem to give the story short shrift. I mean, the thing that I remember, maybe this is a generational issue, but in the 1950s, you could watch a movie, a black and white movie that had horrendous special effects, and still enjoy it because the story was engrossing. I mean, you care about the characters, you wonder what's going to happen to them. It was just a good story, and the special effects were unbelievably primitive by today's standards. They'd have rockets with little sparklers coming out of the back of it for propulsion.
So, I mean, when you watched Transformers with Shia LaBeouf, like, you didn't feel...
I never watched Transformers because I know I would not find it interesting.
Okay.
It would just be a bunch of special effects that would bore me to tears.
Well, yeah, okay. That's definitely... Yep. I mean, I don't even know what science fiction movies you've watched recently. I couldn't tell you, but...
Well, the most recent one we saw in the movie theaters was Lucy. It was pretty good.
Okay.
That wasn't bad. It had plenty of good special effects, but at least it was a story that you could follow, and had kind of an upbeat ending and everything. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't enjoy stories that have depressing endings. I don't enjoy stories that that show the world that have sadistic characters in them, and so which seems to be so rampant now. I don't know why it's so rampant, but there's enough misery in life and enough that you have to deal with anyways in your lifetime. I don't see why people enjoy sitting there and exposing themselves to unnecessary amounts of it.
True. I mean, but for instance, like, wouldn't you say that in Lord of the Rings, for instance, the orcs and Saruman are pretty sadistic characters, but but it's kind of more focused on
Well,
the
it's
heroes.
so,
and that.
you know, I did see Lord of the Rings, and that's another example. I mean, I didn't enjoy the movie anywhere near as much as I enjoyed the books when I read them in college. But the books captured my imagination. The movie, it's just lots of special effects. It's well done for the special effects, if that's what turns you on. But the story was nowhere near as engrossing as the actual written story in the books. So I didn't particularly enjoy that. And those kind of characters, I don't see them as sadistic because it's just so fantastic. They don't bear any, I can dismiss it as not bearing any reality, any connection to reality. So I don't really see it that way.
So if someone was to announce a redoing of the movie Dune, or based on the actual book, or some of the books you enjoyed reading, Heinlein and so forth, if they were to be faithful to the books and try to make it not so special effects heavy, but actually capture what you liked about that, would you go see those movies?
Yes.
Yeah.
But these days, I generally wouldn't even go to see a movie unless the reviews look like, from reviewers that I kind of trust, would indicate it's interesting. Just don't have the time for it, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. And thanks for being on my show. I will see you all next week.